You know, we've all heard that saying, right? The internet is forever. But what if that's not really true? What if our collective digital memory is actually less like a permanent record and more like an old photograph that's just been left out in the sun, slowly, quietly fading away? Today, we're digging into the surprisingly fragile nature of our own digital history.
I want you to picture this for a second. You can hear that awful, screeching sound of a dial-up modem connecting you to the world. You're staring at a huge, bulky monitor, and you're just waiting for a single picture to load, one painful line at a time. This was the wild frontier of the World Wide Web. And believe it or not, a few artifacts from that frontier are actually still with us.
And that brings us to our first exhibit. It's this perfect little time capsule, straight out of the dial-up era. Okay, check this out. The original 1996 website for the movie Space Jam. And the amazing part is, it is completely unchanged. It's a perfect snapshot of what the web used to look like. You've got that classic repeating starfield background, everything's in good old Times New Roman font, and it's even built with something called frames, which was this old school technique where different parts of the page were basically separate documents all loading together. It is a beautiful, clunky, and, as one source puts it, pleasantly kitsch and retro piece of living history. The Space Jam site is so cool because it's an exception. It's a total fluke that it survived. And that just brings up a much, much bigger question, right? What happened to the millions of other websites, all the animations, the games, the art, the very first digital communities that have just completely vanished? Well, that question leads us directly to this fascinating and, frankly, super urgent field that's all about chasing these digital ghosts. It's called Digital Archaeology. And simply put, it's the practice of finding and restoring all those important digital artifacts, the websites, the art, the early online experiments that were made on hardware and software that literally doesn't exist anymore. It is a full-on rescue mission for our digital culture. And the stakes here are just incredibly high. This problem goes all the way back to the very beginning. This quote, it's about the very first web page created by Tim Berners-Lee back in 1991. The original file was simply overwritten. There are no copies. Not even a screenshot exists. The literal birth of the World Wide Web is gone. It's this quiet tragedy that really shows you how fragile this medium we all think of as permanent actually is. So let's zoom in on one of the biggest digital preservation battles of the last decade. We're talking about an entire era of the internet that was defined by a single piece of software. We are talking, of course, about Adobe Flash. Back in the dial-up days, Flash was a total game changer. It let you do animation and sound without these giant file sizes. And from about 2000 to 2005, it was the absolute golden age for independent artists and tiny studios to just create weird, amazing stuff online. But then things got more complicated. Adobe bought it, making it heavier and more corporate. Then, in 2010, Steve Jobs published his famous letter, Thoughts on Flash, which was this brutal takedown that basically marked the beginning of the end. A new standard called HTML5 came along, making Flash plugins obsolete, and by 2020, Adobe pulled the plug for good. So what were we actually losing when we lost Flash? I mean, it was so much more than a plugin. It was a cultural engine. For countless young creators, Flash was their first step into making games and animation. It gave us memes and catchphrases that defined a whole generation of internet culture. It gave us bizarre advert games and deeply personal, strange, wonderful works from individual artists. An entire creative ecosystem, all centered on sites like Newgrounds, was suddenly at risk of just blinking out of existence. So who steps in to save an entire digital universe from disappearing? Well, let's meet the heroes of this story. The people and institutions saving our digital history, like the amazing Internet Archive, they operate on this really powerful philosophy: access drives preservation. The idea is simple. The best way to make sure something is safe for the future is to make it easy for people to see it and use it right now. You can't just lock it away in a vault. You have to keep it alive. So how do they actually do it? I mean, what's the tech? Well, the problem was that all this Flash content needed Adobe's specific software to run. When Adobe killed that software, everything broke overnight. The solution is this incredible open-source tool called Ruffle. Think of it like a universal translator. It's an emulator that converts the old Flash code into modern web standards, like on the fly. And the result? You can now play a huge library of historic Flash content right in your browser. No downloads, no plugins. It's just a really elegant solution to a massive problem. And the sheer scale of these rescue missions is just staggering. The Internet Archive isn't the only one doing this. There's another huge effort called Blue Maximus Flashpoint, and they have archived a playable collection of web games and animations that is nearly 500 gigabytes. That is just an immense library of creativity that was saved right from the brink.
And this kind of work goes way beyond just old games and cartoons. A really powerful example is the end-of-term web archive. Now think about this. Every time a new presidential administration comes into office, the old government websites get completely overhauled. Reports, data, policy pages, huge sections can just vanish overnight. This project has the critical mission of capturing and saving U.S. government websites before that transition happens. And this isn't just about saving old web design. It's about preserving a public record of our own civic history for accountability.
So all of this work to save the past, it really forces us to look at the present and to ask some pretty tough questions about the web that we are building right now. You see, this preservation work is so important when you stop and think about the web we have today versus the original vision. Tim Berners-Lee imagined this decentralized, multiply connected web, a shared pool of info with no central boss. The reality today is pretty different. We live more and more inside walled gardens. Social media platforms and apps that are built to keep us inside their walls. Their business models depend on controlling our experience and our data, which means content gets locked in, controlled by just a few huge companies, and is often incredibly difficult to archive. Ultimately, the work of these digital archaeologists is a kind of warning for all of us. Today's internet is unimaginably bigger than the dial-up era, and it forces us to ask a really tough question. What about the culture we're creating right now? The Discord servers where communities are built, the Instagram stories that document our lives, the TikTok trends that define a cultural moment? What parts of our current digital world are being created on these fragile platforms that might not even exist in 5 or 10 years? What are we losing right now without even realizing it?